It's funny. Think Film has since gone out of business since I used this as an example, but I had this very funny interchange with their head of marketing after I met him at a conference, where it's like, to get materials to help promote their movies, you had to have a username and password. And so I was so angered by that, like I called them up, and it took me so many phone calls to get them to give me, like, I'm a legitimate member of the media, like, you know, and I had to put all this effort into getting into this, you know, getting past this password box to help promote their movies. Like, this is a world where anyone can build an audience for your stuff, and so you want to make it easy for them to take stuff. And you obviously always want to have that pointer back to, like, here's where you can buy it, here's where you can learn more. But, you know, don't feel like you need to control everything. And you still see it where someone has a flash video or a flash movie on their website that you can't figure out. I mean, I'm sort of an avid blogger. You can't figure out, like, there's no way to take that and put it somewhere else. I think that a lot of this stuff can be overwhelming, and I think for everyone, you're going to have to find the right channel to communicate with your fans and the right frequency to do it. It doesn't have to be every 5 minutes on Twitter or every day an update to your blog. And for a lot of people, it's like the least complex thing, because, you know, you're working on a big project and you don't want all of this digital communication stuff to take over your life. And so this is one example of a blogging tool that I love, where, like, if you haven't built a website or you haven't started a blog and you're kind of intimidated by the complexity level, Posterous is like the easiest possible way to blog. And the cool thing is that you can just email it, and it will post as a blog post whatever you email it. So if you send along a picture, it presents that as a picture. If you send it a PDF, it puts that in a nice little PDF reader. It puts videos and players. And it's great. I actually use it for a blog where I just forwarded emails that I get, like, that I think people would be interested in. And so it's a blog called Read Scott's Email. And it just made it so easy to do, where, like, I think for, you know, 2 seconds, like, let me forward this email to my blog. And then another example is, you know, is Twitter. For some people, Twitter will be, you know, an easy sort of uncomplicated channel to communicate with your fans. For some people, Twitter might feel a little oppressive, like, oh, geez, I need to go update Twitter today. I need to tell it, like, what's the latest with my project, or where, you know, what film festival I'm at. So, you know, use the things that feel authentic to you and feel like a good way to communicate with people. Don't feel like, you will see a lot of websites where they have all the little icons where they're like, join our Facebook fan page, and subscribe to our blog, and here's our email newsletter, and you know, we're also on Twitter, and we're on MySpace, and we have a podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. Like, don't be intimidated by those people. Michael Buckley, incidentally, is one of those people who just, like, every channel he could possibly use, he does it. Just pick the ones that work for you. In the old world, marketing and promotion wasn't really your job if you were an artist. It was someone would buy, you know, a studio, record label, book publisher, art gallery would buy your stuff, you know, or represent you, and that was their job. And, like, your job was, maybe they would fly you, you know, to New York, or they'd fly you to Cannes, and you would have to give some interviews, you know, like, and that was really hard. And so I really do think in the old world it was like maybe 5 or 10% of your time was about marketing, because someone else bought or represented the product and they dealt with that for you. And I think you have to acknowledge now that the pendulum is swinging to a place where, you know, it's going to be a 70-30 split or a 60-40 split of, you know, 60 or 70% of your time spent doing what you want to do, and 30 or 40% of your time building up an audience and building these relationships. And look, some of them might be relationships with traditional distributors or publishers or record labels, but a lot of them are going to be these relationships with, like, blogs and membership organizations and nonprofits. And, you know, you can argue against it, and you might be one of those people who, you know, Fox discovers you and gives you a great deal, and, you know, you've got an office on the lot, and you don't have, you know, you can still be a 5 or 10% person. It'll still happen sometimes, but I really think you can't fight the fact that the pendulum is swinging the other way, and, you know, you have to dedicate more time to it. And then the first question, I mean, I think you'd be a shyster if you said that everyone's going to be able to do this. It is going to be a little bit the same as, look, today it's very hard to make a living as a band. 10 years ago it was hard to make a living as a band and lots of people never got out of their garages. I actually think the difference now is that all these tools and distribution channels at least give you the opportunity to get heard by a global audience without getting the record deal. So I actually think at least the great thing that's happened is you can reach people who love what you're doing. And the worst case scenario now is, maybe they just friend you on Facebook and they never give you $1. And it is hard. And you're still, living with 7 roommates here in the Mission, So I think things have improved a little bit. But I just think it'd be irresponsible to say that, it's going to be easy for everyone. And all you need to do is set up your YouTube channel and you're going to be making $1 million next year. So other questions back there? I actually have a slide a little later where I talk about that idea. I think for everyone it's going to be a different ratio of how much do you give away for free versus what do you try to pay for. I mean, if you think about the old world of the movies, the only thing they gave away for free was the trailer. And so it was like, here's 2.5 minutes of clips from the movie, and that's it. That's all you get. Or maybe you also get, Angelina Jolie showing up on Letterman and showing up on Conan and whatever. I don't think that model works so well anymore, so I think you probably have to give away more stuff for free. But there are writers who say, look, you have to give away the whole book digitally for free to get people to buy the hardcover or buy the paperback. And I just don't buy that. And, I've sold, thousands of copies now of this book in digital form. And so, I'm glad that I didn't say, I'm going to give it away for free in digital form. But it's going to be I don't think there's any formula where you can say, all right, you want to give away 25% of the film for free on different blogs and keep 75% of it. For some people, it can be giving away the whole film for free is going to sell a lot of DVDs or get a lot of people. You're going to create this great theatrical experience and go around and do bookings at different indie cinemas around the country. And because people have seen it for free, they want to meet other people who also love this film. So, yeah.
Quick question about the distribution. I went to this game conference for iPhones, and they had these guys that were up there, and they were basically saying that the only way you can get your stuff sold is if you go through a distributor. So everybody kind of thinks of this iPhone and the iTunes store as the indie type model, but I was just amazed that they were still going to these people that claim to have the power to be able to get it known.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're saying, is that you need to go to these bottleneck type sites that consolidate. So what's going to stop these people from, like you maybe, from appearing that will have the power to open the gates for you?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't.
I don't mean you.
Yeah, I don't position myself as I don't think you need it. Now I'm going to tell you this. You don't need to come to this workshop to be successful. No. There are still distributors, and, Jamin, which we were talking about before, was one of them that said, the way we're going to split revenues, we want to help rent and sell your film digitally, and we're going to create this destination that's all for world cinema and independent cinema, and the split is going to be we keep 70% of the revenue and you get 30%. That was a bad distribution deal, and lots of people called them out on it, and iTunes is the reverse. It's we keep 30%, you keep 70%. So
But what I was saying was that there's actually
even then, there's still right.
there.
So even to get your film on iTunes, it's different with music in that you can go through distributors that I think have either small or minimal fees, like CD Baby is one of them, and IOTA, the Independent Online Distribution Alliance. So for some things like iTunes, there are still middlemen. For other things like selling a video or selling a book on Amazon, because Amazon kind of becomes the middleman and they take a cut. The example that I would use is that you can, and there are filmmakers that I know that will sell a download directly from their website. And so for the people that you can get to come to your website, you can sell a download very, very cheaply. You know, you're just paying some company to sort of be the cash register that, you know, that takes their PayPal, and in exchange for taking $10 or whatever it is from PayPal, serves up the download. And there's really no intermediary taking a cut. But the challenge is how many people are going to come to your website versus how many people every month are going to Amazon or iTunes. So I think you do have to still acknowledge that those middlemen are not going to go away, and hopefully it's getting more transparent in terms of what cut are they asking for, and are they really delivering some value to you. Yeah.
I think that it's also a little problematic, like comparing music to film to books.
Mm-hmm.
Music already, I've heard a lot of talk where they're saying the actual MP3 is worthless, that people are giving it away for free, and that the only way musicians are going to make money is by selling their performances. And we've already seen like Coldplay, Prince, we've seen some higher end people doing that. And unfortunately, it's really squashing some people down below who are still trying to get money to buy a guitar, you know. So, I mean, a film, to me, has such a tremendous amount of investment on the front end before anybody gets to see anything. You know, and you have to prove your own worth in the community as well to get paid. And I like eating, and I find it very frustrating. And you know that, you know, because I do think that the music, if film is following the music way, the download of the film isn't even worth anything, and it's not like as if you have some other performance of value.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, a couple of responses, and I don't want to represent like the status quo in any way, because I'm, you know, I like eating too. You know, so I don't think film is necessarily going to follow exactly what's happened with music. And with music, there still are some examples. Like if you go to Jonathan Colton's website, he is still selling digital versions, and you can make the argument that I'm going to give away a version of it for free that may be a lower fi version, or it's a streaming version. And then if you want to support me and let me continue doing this, you know, it's kind of the NPR appeal of like, I need your help to keep doing this. People still, I think, will buy even digital music. With film, I think, you know, there's an opportunity to create these live theatrical events, you know, where like your actors are doing something before, during, after the movie, and kind of go back almost to the 50s and that idea of like Cinerama, Smell-O-Vision, you know, all these great, you know, sort of transcendent experiences that you would have in the movie theater. I think there's an opportunity to sell yourself as a speaker, kind of introducing the film and doing a Q&A afterwards, whether you do it in person or you do it via Skype, you know, like at a college campus, saying, you know, I've talked a lot actually with Tiffany about this idea, Tiffany Schlane, who's a documentary filmmaker in Mill Valley. This idea of, you know, a lot of college campuses want to bring you to speak to their classes, but they can't pay you $5,000 to get on a plane and, you know, support you for 2 days of the trip. But maybe they could pay you $500 to do the Skype, you know, visit and Skype Q&A with their students. So I do think live performances offer some potential, and I think that some people have tried giving away the whole film for free. Four-Eyed Monsters, when they were on YouTube, they had this deal where you could stream the whole film for free on YouTube, but they were trying to get users for some other website. And so they sort of had a message at the beginning like, hey, you know, we're giving this whole film for free. There's this other website that all you have to do is go sign up as a user, and they'll give us $1 for every user that we send their way. And so they made, I forget exactly what the number was, somewhere $50,000, $100,000 from doing that. And I think there's also a possibility, like G was talking about before, is like, what do you give away for free? How much? If you think about there being 30% of your film that's out there circulating on these different blogs and sites, and maybe it's pieces that aren't in your film, but they're kind of different doorways or gateways into the story or into the world of your film, maybe that stuff is free, and it engages people to the point where they're like, man, I gotta throw a house party and show this film to all my friends. I'm going to go buy the $25 DVD.
By the way, the Four-Eyed Monsters, they got rejected by a bunch of film festivals before they put it to YouTube.
Yeah.
And how that's how they get their beauty. And one of the only reasons I got picked up at a film festival.
Yeah.
Can I just like to make a comment to support what Scott's been telling us? I come from a strong business background. I don't come from a filmmaking background, but it feeds my filmmaking end. You have to find your audience before you make your film. And I don't know if you all know who Chris Anderson is in the long tail principle, but I think every film that all of you have ever made does have an audience. It's finding it. And Chris Anderson started Wired magazine, and if you follow him at all, he developed this theory called the long tail, that there's an audience. It's small, but we actually have more access to making money as independents than we ever did before, because of how the internet allows us to approach the audience. So I think it's our creativity in the audience and how we get to it. And another comment, I was just telling Scott earlier, I have learned so much from him because I've been following him for a couple of years, and I didn't realize it till tonight, sitting here and listening to him talk. It has so informed my film business, but you really have to realize you've got to be a business person before you're a filmmaker, or you won't eat. But I have been reading, along with Scott's material, other material that says even when people download for free, if you've got them as a part of your audience and they like you, they actually will pay. They'll download it for free, but they may also buy a DVD for a different form of viewing. So don't just think because the overall consensus is in the marketplace today that people download for free, that they're not going to buy. Statistics
Yeah.
are showing that those customers, if you develop them, they will also buy the same film on a DVD or a piece of music on a DVD. And you had the young woman who was with three different music labels.
Yeah, Jill
before
Sibyl.
She went on her own, and the creative things she did, she's making money, and she gives away some stuff for free, but the audience is loyal and they buy as well.
Yeah.
So take heart.
Let me just get through a couple more of these ideas, and we can keep talking. I think they're not going to kick us out. Do you want to?
Yeah. Do you have a difference in the price point of the downloadable book versus the published book?
Yeah, the downloadable one is like $9.95, I think, for a PDF that you can do whatever you want. You can email it to a friend, print it out, whatever. I forget what the price point is on Kindle. Amazon, as we were talking about kind of as an intermediary, Amazon you sort of suggest a price, and then Amazon sells it for whatever they want to sell it. So I think Amazon maybe sells the Kindle version about that same price, like $7.99 or $9.99. And then the paperback version is $15.95. So with all these new channels that we've been talking about, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, I actually think there's still an incredible amount of value in having an email connection with someone, even though it still seems so old school. But you and I were talking, you don't really visit my blog, but you get the email version of my blog. So that's kind of my email list, is that I have a couple thousand people who get, every time I update my blog, it just sends them out an email. These guys work down in Venice, California, Jib Jab. They do these really funny political animations. This land is your land. It's good to be in DC. And they're in the book. They started the company in 1999 in Brooklyn, so very early days of the internet. And they, over a bunch of years of releasing different kind of viral videos, they had an email list of 120,000 subscribers that took them about 5 years to build. And in July of 2004, they did This Land, which was the year that Kerry was running against Bush.
And absolutely awesome.
Yeah, a great video. They had 700,000 people after that video. The one thing that was funny, they got invited to The Tonight Show that year in 2004. And so Evan is on the right. He's the artist. Greg is the business guy. They're brothers, Greg and Evan Spiridelis. And they got invited on The Tonight Show. And they were like, well, usually when people on The Tonight Show, when people go on The Tonight Show, they have something to pitch. And like, we don't really have anything to pitch. Like, people have they just showed our video on The Tonight Show. Like, we don't really have anything there's no movie to go see. And so they mocked up a DVD case, and Evan designed like the cover of a DVD. And when they went on with Jay, they're like, and if you go to our website, you can pre-order this DVD, which is a compilation of all of our best, funniest animations. And the next day, they sold 10,000 copies of the DVD. And they were like, all right, now it's time to make the DVD. And today on their email list, they have 4 million people. And they talk in the book about not abusing the email list. And if you're on it, you don't get an email once a week every time they put something new on their website. But it's like the 3 or 4 times a year that they make like one of their really big, like in December, they usually do a year-end wrap-up video. They choose very judiciously when they're going to email you. You mentioned Four-Eyed Monsters. They did something really smart, which was, you can sort of see at the bottom of the screen, they asked for your email address and your zip code. And doing something with the zip codes is not as easy for those of you who are not computer programmers as it should be, but they had some friends who were computer programmers, and so what they could do was they took your zip code and then they plotted it on this Google map. All those different hearts were how many people loved and wanted to see Four-Eyed Monsters in a theater in their town. So Four-Eyed Monsters, as G mentioned, it was at a couple of film festivals, didn't get picked up for distribution. So they started a podcast series, a free podcast series of videos that they made and distributed through iTunes that anyone could download. But they were kind of about the trials and tribulations of like, we made this movie and no one seems to care about it, except all of the kids, mostly in their teens and early 20s, who've seen it and like really were moved by this film. And so by collecting your email address and zip code, when they arranged screenings in places where they had lots of fans, they could then email just the people in Seattle and say like, hey, we're coming to Seattle. And if you have a nationwide list where you don't have people's zip codes, it kind of gets annoying if you email someone 6 times about a screening in Seattle and they live in Fort Lauderdale and they're like, unsubscribe from your email list. So having that zip code data is good, but it's still harder than it should be. So one thing that some people are using, and Jonathan Colton is someone who uses this, it's a free tool called Performer Dashboard from Eventful. And it lets you put a little widget on your website so you can collect people's geographical information, and Eventful kind of holds all the information for you, but then you could access in Eventful, you could say like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a screening in Washington. Do I have enough fans, in Washington, D.C. to really help me fill up a theater? And Eventful lets you then communicate with the fans in a geographic way. It's not ideal because you don't have the email list. You're sort of communicating them through this performer dashboard, but it is free. It is really easy to integrate into your website. And Jonathan Colton uses it to know, like, he was on a panel that I did at South by Southwest this year. Like, he played a gig in Austin, and he went and used this tool to say, like, do I have enough fans in Dallas and Houston to also play shows there? And so he kind of really selects where he's going to play a show, and he often sells out because he sort of has this information about where do his fans live.
So Eventful does not give the filmmaker that data.
Yeah.
Act as a conduit.
Yeah, exactly. They're a conduit. So it's not ideal if you have a friend. And actually, the guy who built that for Four-Eyed Monsters as a side project, he's been saying for like a year or two that I'm going to build it so that everyone can use it and make it available. But I just think he hasn't gotten around to it, which is unfortunate. So the big caveat about audience building, and Karen, I think you mentioned it before, is that you can't start thinking about how you're going to market what you're doing after you're done with it. And like, so the film's going to be released next week. Like, now let's start thinking about who's the audience and how do we reach them. The analogy that I like to use is, if you're going to open up a restaurant, on Valencia Street, and you're going to open up in 6 months, like, wouldn't you put up the sign now, and wouldn't you put up the menu as soon as you've decided the menu, and wouldn't you put up, just anything, when you have someone standing out in front of the restaurant the week before and handing out flyers, like, you need to think about the build of what you're trying to do almost from the minute you commit to the project. And I just think a lot of people, we talked about the pendulum swing before, a lot of people are so busy making the film or making the album or writing the book that it's not till they're done that they're like, okay, now like, how do I build an audience? Who are my allies going to be in reaching out to this audience? And it's much easier if you're doing it along the way. Like you'll discover a blog and you'll say like, oh, I'm going to go make a note in a Microsoft Word file. Like here's another blog that I should partner with when I'm ready to start releasing clips from my film. So before I want to talk a little bit about commerce models, and then we'll close by talking about a couple of your projects and maybe brainstorming some ideas for them that might be useful. But there were a couple more questions that people wanted to ask. I feel like I saw a couple other hands. The stuff on this slide is on the website. There's actually a lot of stuff that isn't in the book, so kind of DVD bonus material that's all free. And then over the last couple months, I've been building up this wiki called Power Tools that takes the whole last section of the book, which is kind of resources and what are free tools like the eventful dashboard we talked about, but you can add to it. So there are people who know about great services for emailing all your fans that I didn't know about, that they've been adding them to this Power Tools wiki. So it'd be great if you can spread the word, because the more people that add to it, the better it's going to be. And a lot of the services on it are free, different services for blogging or services for advertising on Google or advertising on Facebook or whatever. So if there are no questions, I'm just going to, one question.
Go back to that. How early do you start building your audience? Say this is a documentary and it may be a kind of personal kind of film, not like where you, the filmmaker, you are actually a protagonist. And there's no trailer yet, but you want to start early in the process. And I wonder if there are other people out there who would just go on and put just clips of, even unedited clips, kind of really raw, and start to see what's happening, maybe in a more strategic or at least a strategic way, but just putting it out there, like what maybe suggestions or experiences that other people, other filmmakers have.
Yeah. I think that, the process is becoming a little bit more of an open book, and that the value you can gain from having stuff out there earlier is just so great. And people worry a lot about, what am I going to lose by having people see stuff that isn't perfect or isn't finished? And I don't know. I just think that that's maybe not a productive mindset to be in. Peter Broderick, who's a great friend of mine, and we put on an event in LA last month, talks about this idea of like a filmmaker persona. And this idea of the filmmaker used to be just behind the scenes, and like the only time that they would come out was, for those interviews at Cannes or those interviews at Sundance, where like the media would suddenly be interested in actually who made this movie. But now I do think you have to think of yourself as, in the way M. Strange does, the animator from San Jose, was like, people want to learn from you, and they want to know your story, and they want to tell you their story if they're like you. And that you do have to kind of think of yourself almost as like the Oprah of your own little subject area, your own little niche. That you're, maybe some of the videos on your YouTube channel are you meeting some of the other people who are related to your story, who have their own similar stories. I mean, just be creative about what way are you going to engage people that's more than just give me your email address so I can tell you when the film is done, or when you can buy the DVD. Yeah, Jim.
Just related to that engagement, you spoke about the lawyer from Disney and how he's like, you can't do that. I mean, is that because the laws related to Disney are different than the ones that relate to me? Is it just because I don't have the money that Disney has? Or, I mean, how do you make decisions like that?
Well, look, anyone can sue you, whether you're just you or whether you're Disney, if they think that the fear at Disney was, if someone in a way user-generated content comes up with a character that Disney one day creates a character that's similar to that character, they could then sue Disney for a lot of money and like potentially win, and that worries the attorneys. I think if you have a relationship like Brett Gaylor had with the Girl Talk documentary, where you're like, I want you to participate in this, you're going to get credit, you're not going to be, if you're upfront about, you're not going to have points in this movie or have a share of the revenue, because you uploaded a photo, or even because you wrote a song that I'm going to include in my movie. I just think you have to be upfront about what the transaction is. You know, what are you going to give people? There's an example of a film called Star Wreck that's in the book that was made in Finland. It's a parody of Star Trek. If you can imagine, like a Finnish guy is doing a Star Trek parody. And they found a composer who wrote the entire score for the film just for the credit, you know? And so they were very upfront about that transaction. Like, we'll give you a lot of exposure in this film, and we'll give you a credit, and, you know, that's it.
Scott, what do you think is the better way to deal with YouTube upload these days, given that YouTube has grown to the extent it has, and it's much harder to get attention on it than it used to be? What would you suggest?
Well, it's interesting. There's one little technique that, you know, frequent YouTubers know about, which is if you find a popular video that's related to the topic that you're making a video. So let's say, you know, you're making a narrative feature about these crazy group of guys who do off-road rally driving in the deserts outside of Los Angeles, and you find that on YouTube people have posted some real videos about them doing that, you know, that they've shot with their cell phone cam or their DV cam or whatever, and you find one that has 100,000 views or 500,000 views, and it's someone's car flipping over and bursting into flames. And you can post your video as a response to that video. And so when you poke around YouTube, you'll see certain videos will say, you know, Carol has posted a video response to this. So in a way, you're kind of like linking your video to something that already has an audience. And on YouTube, once something has been seen 100,000 times, it's likely to get to 500,000. It's likely to get to 1 million. And the crazy YouTube story I like to tell is that, like, I have a video, like basically a family vacation video on YouTube that I posted. And I think just because it's like my family went on a cruise a couple years ago, and the title of the video is very creatively Royal Caribbean Cruise. And over time, like, I noticed, like, the video got 500 views and 1,000 views, and now it's like 35,000 views on YouTube for like a home video of this cruise that my family took in. So I've just been seeing firsthand how, like, stuff, once it gets a certain amount of views, it just will continue growing over time. So responding is a good way to kind of draft off of those popular videos. So real quickly, I'm just going to spend 5-7 minutes or so talking about what are some of the new business models. Some of them are old business models that can support you. Selling physical stuff still works, thankfully. And for a lot of filmmakers, DVDs and signed DVDs are still a great source of revenue. For a lot of musicians, signing a CD, or for me, signing a book is a great source of revenue. Up on the top of the screen are these guys who make a series called Red versus Blue. And they have a neat model where all the videos are free on their website, but if you're a member and you pay a monthly membership fee, you get access to the new videos a couple days early. And they have a real cult following. So people buy memberships, but they also sell all this merch. Gary, they tell me that DVDs are their biggest source of revenue, and T-shirts are number 2. Gary Hustwit, his new movie that just came out this year is called Objectified, and it's all about the people who design the iPhone and these, you know, all these beautiful objects that we use. He created this limited edition of 500 USB drives, and they sell for $75 each, and each one has a copy of the movie on it. And he also mentioned, I talked to him sort of recently, he said on iTunes, his previous documentary is called Helvetica, and it's the story of the font. Really great documentary. And he's broken into 6 figures of revenue just on iTunes for that movie. And I didn't mention this just as Carlton is here, but Tiffany Schlane's short film, The Tribe, which is, I think, like 15 minutes long, Carlton? 18 minutes long. She sells this amazing discussion kit. So if you're like a synagogue, or the movie is about the sort of intersection between the Barbie doll and contemporary Judaism. And so she sells this amazing discussion kit for like synagogues and Jewish youth groups and women's groups. And it costs, what's the price point on that? $40 for the kit. It used to be more expensive, I think.
No, it's 40 for the kit, 25 for the DVD.
Okay.
We probably sell. I'm pretty sure the kits do a lot better than the DVDs.
Yeah, and it has like a discussion guide and some cards in it, like conversation cards. So go check it out. What Tiffany is selling.
Actually, something I should mention, though,
Yeah.
too, which is a big revenue stream for filmmakers, potentially, is that we also have another price for educational use.
That's the one I was trying to think of. So there's like a $200 or $300 price point.
Yeah, we developed a curriculum to go with it. So that's part of an educational package that sells for $2.99.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about selling downloads. I mean, I think as Gary's price point, as Gary's breaking into $100,000 just on iTunes with a documentary about a font. These are becoming big marketplaces. Amazon, it's easier to get your film on Amazon right now than it is on iTunes, but for whatever reason, people on Amazon, we don't really think of that yet as like a place to go to download and rent movies. I'm hoping that'll change. I think the revenue split is about the same. It's like a 70-30 revenue split on both of these places.
70 to them.
Yeah, no, 70 to you, 30 to them.
That's changed then.
Yeah, it may have. Yeah. How long can the... Say that again, like, so how long can the...
On iTunes, how long? Movie or film, how long? Is it available? Can you put a 2-hour movie on it?
Like, is the question, could you put a 2 or 3 or 4 hour movie on iTunes? I actually don't know what their limits are. It's interesting. An hour, they start to consider it a TV show, and so then they put it at a lower price point than a movie, which is interesting. So they have their own price points that you will adhere to. For short films, so the Tribe on iTunes is, I think, $1.99. TV shows are a $2.99 price point, and then movies are like $9.99 and up. So it's a good question. DJ Spooky, who's on the left, Sandy Dubowski, who's on the right, make a lot of money from speaking gigs at universities and to conventions and to different interest groups. And Sandy does a workshop, around the world for different independent filmmakers who are trying to figure out a lot of these same issues, like what is the new world of distribution? How does it work? Sandy made this great movie called Trembling Before God about gay and lesbian Orthodox Jews, and he just produced a movie 2 years ago about gays and lesbians in the Arab world called A Jihad for Love. We've been talking about YouTube. YouTube, once you've become an established content creator, will start sharing some of the advertising revenue with you. And I think that's more of like an 80-20 split, where the ad dollars that they get, I think it's in the book, but what I remember is it's about 80-20. And so once you become really popular on YouTube, the advertising can be a decent source of income. But you need to be producing lots of videos, and they all need to be in the 50,000, 100,000 and up view range, which is kind of where Michael Buckley is at. And Snag Films is doing the same thing. They're streaming full-length documentaries on their site and giving you a share of the advertising revenue. The difference is I think Snag Films does a little bit more to also help sell that person the DVD. In YouTube, your best chance if you have a feature film that you're trying to sell them is there's a little information box with every video. Your best hope is to put your link, a link to your website in that information box and say, and if you're interested in the full-length film, buy the DVD here. Some people try this idea of giving the whole thing away for free and asking for a donation. So Vodo is a relatively new service. It stands for voluntary donation. This is kind of what I've been doing with my book, which is I don't discourage people if you pay $10 for a copy of the PDF. I don't discourage you from sharing it with all of your musician friends. But in the PDF, there's a little line at the end that, if you got this for free, you're welcome to visit the website and make a donation. And so it's amazing to me that every week I'll get a couple, $3, $5, $10 donations from people who must have gotten the PDF and said, like, yeah, I actually would like to contribute back a little bit. What's that? Yeah, Hulu's just, I don't think there's much independent film there yet. You know, it's still, you know, it was started by Fox and NBC, and so it's still has that major media studio orientation. But I think that could potentially be a, you know, there's some people like Cinetic in New York that have gotten some documentaries onto Hulu, and then you can get a revenue share, advertising revenue share from them. So thanks for mentioning that. What's that? Yeah, an IndieFlix. Yeah, I'm definitely not trying to be comprehensive here. I'm just trying to throw up an example of every model. But IndieFlix is great for, I think they both sell DVDs and downloads and do some revenue sharing. Bands have really been more successful at creating subscriptions and clubs and different memberships that people can join. But I mentioned before, Red versus Blue has this idea of become a member and will both highlight you on the site. Whenever you post a message, you get a little icon that shows that you're a supporter of their website. This is from David Lynch's website. He has some kind of $9.95 a month subscription that gets you access to the inner mind of David Lynch, if you dare. But a lot of rock bands do it, where, you know, there's special merchandise that they make, and if you're a member of the U2 fan club, you know, or the Rolling Stones fan club, you can buy this special merchandise, or there are special ticket blocks that you can get access to. So it's worth, you know, it's worth thinking about. And in the book and on the Power Tools wiki, I talk about different systems that you can use to support, you know, the $5.95 a month or $10.95 a month subscription idea. Some people, you know, if you or someone on your team can sort of build relationships with different corporations, you can sell sponsorships to what you're doing. Hunter Weeks, who made this film, and his partner Josh Caldwell, made a film about fantasy football and sold sponsorships to Quiznos, and I don't exactly understand Crocs. Like, maybe people who play fantasy football wear Crocs, or Crocs thinks that they should be wearing Crocs. So, you know, had a contest for people to win a trip to Las Vegas that Quiznos sponsored. And Zay Frank, who I mentioned earlier, sold a sponsorship to Doers, oddly, where, you know, Doers just wanted to do more stuff on the internet. So Zay Frank said, yeah, I'll take your money and you can be the sponsor of, you know, all the video archives on my website. And he also came up with this idea of like mini sponsorships that individuals could do. So on a lot of the pages of his website, for $5 to $50, you could be a sponsor and you would get to put a little message on his website. You know, kind of like, I don't know if I was just listening to Prairie Home Companion, and Garrison Keillor will read these little lines of messages that the audience gives him. So you could kind of almost put a little graffiti on Zay's website. And finally, you know, there are some entertainment and media sites that have raised venture capital money. One of them is Funny or Die, the Will Ferrell site. And this is Jib Jab. They've raised a couple $1 million in venture capital funding to kind of support this idea of their business shifting from just making cool viral animated videos to making different e-cards that people pay a monthly subscription to be able to send for birthdays and Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and whatever. But, you know, venture capital, the bet is that they're going to give you money, and at some point you're not just going to create a film or an album, but you're going to create some giant business that'll be worth a lot of money.
Scott, I just read one today where this, it's a comics book that I can't think of the name of, but they're selling frames in the film, and every 12 frames is just enough to have your name visible. For like $25 or something.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I mean, I think you can be just endlessly creative about ways where, you know, someone can give you $10 and they're not just buying the product, but they're kind of becoming a micro producer.
And even though the film's running, the name's going to appear in the bottom right corner.
Yeah. So we've been talking about some of these issues in the Q&A throughout, but, you know, these are just 4 things I wanted to spotlight when you're trying to sell your stuff. I mean, one is the question of how much do you give away for free, and what do you ask people to pay for? And there's no right answer. You know, this is an essay question. the second is kind of once someone knows about your film, is this question of instant versus delayed gratification. So once someone hears about your film and is like, gosh, I really would like to see that, and it's not available, they can't purchase it now, you need to kind of somehow tap into that purchase impulse and, like, at the very least get their email address so that when it is available, you can get back in touch with them. But there are some people who really believe that, at a moment, like if your film has gotten into Sundance and everyone's reviewing it and it has all this buzz, like, why not sell it then? Or why not sell it the week after Sundance? Why sort of go that old school route of saying, well, 9 months later, we're going to release it to theaters, and then 4 months after that, we're going to release the DVD. Like, it's often really hard to recapture all that excitement that's been generated by some high-profile event. A subtext to all of this is, like, DVDs and CDs and books are a great thing to sell right now, and people will pay $15, $20, $25, $300 to buy a DVD. But are we moving towards a world where everything is just going to be digital and downloadable, and people seem to have a different psychological price point of what they'll pay for something that's digital?
I was going to ask about timing, as far as building your audience versus when your product is coming out. And I know you should be building your audience, like you said, early on, but it just seems like there's nothing, they can't go and buy it or see the film or do anything with that yet. Then you have this kind of dead space, timing-wise.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think avoiding that kind of dead space, like at least having some reason to communicate with them every month. And it's like, here's another clip, especially for you people on my Facebook fan page, or here's some great photos from the location, or here's a contest where we want you to help do X. Like we're trying to get another 1,000 people onto our email list, and if you can get more names, we're going to I'm going to give you a ticket to the Sundance premiere, whatever it may be. And the last thing is that some people, someone wrote a book recently and they're like, if you help promote the book on your blog, Scott, I'll give you a cut of every book that you sell. And that's kind of the idea of like paying someone a referral fee or an affiliate fee for helping you sell your merchandise. I just don't like that idea. Like for me, I just want to promote stuff because I think it's good or I think it's worth knowing about. But I just wanted to make you kind of aware of that idea, that if you like the idea, if you think you can get more people to help sell your stuff by saying, I'm going to give you a 10% cut of every sale, there are different shopping carts and different software things where you can say like, all right, I'm going to give you the code, AB and you the code CD, and whenever someone uses those codes, you guys get a 10% kickback. So I just want to bring that up as an idea. Just a couple slides in wrapping up, and then I want to do a little bit of brainstorming with you before I release you out into the wild. I think there are 3 approaches to commerce, and I talk about this in the book. Approach number 1 is to outsource everything and to say like, look, I just want to be in the business of making this stuff. I want to get as much of this selling off my plate. And so, an example of that would be, you find some distributor that will get your film or your music on iTunes, and you acknowledge that they're going to take a cut, and that's okay, but you're just going to promote the hell out of it and try to sell a lot of downloads. In the middle is kind of you saying, I'm going to manufacture my DVD or my CD in bulk. I'm going to have 5,000 of them made, and then I'm going to hand it to a fulfillment house that's going to handle all of the orders that come through my website. And so that's a little bit better in terms of how much of the revenue you get to keep than model number 1. But it's not quite as good as model number 3, which is like the basement model of you make those 5,000 DVDs, you store them in your basement, and your little sister, every time an order comes in, your little sister gets an envelope and puts a DVD in the envelope and addresses the envelope and sends it out. And that's sort of the best model economically. But if you don't have a little sister who's underemployed, it could be you stuffing that envelope. So we can talk more about that if you want, but just wanted to lay those out. Hopefully these are some of the ideas that have come out this evening, that the way you build an audience is changing, the way you're going to earn money is changing, and that I think that trying to continue along the models that have worked for the last 20, 50, 100 years is probably the most dangerous, least intelligent thing you could be doing now. And I think that, you know, all these examples are people who've been experimenting in ways where they're not investing $100,000 in an experiment. They're experimenting cheaply and quickly and seeing what resonates with people. I mean, the thing I love about the Jonathan Coulton example is, like, I'm not just going to make 8 songs and put them on an album and hope that people love that. It's like, I'm going to make 52 songs this year, and, you know, it turned into 5 or 6 albums, and it was just a lot of different shots on goal. I think this group, you know, by virtue of being here, I'm inviting you to sort of be one of these examples for the next one of these workshops. And, you know, although you were pointing out that the odds are, it's not like suddenly every lottery ticket is going to be a winner. I mean, this is still a hard business to succeed in. But I think you got to experiment. You got to try to be a pioneer to survive into this shift.